in. A question was asked about whether or not you could ask the questions live or type them in, and we were talking about the best way to do that. And I think for trying to get the flow of all this, we'll first do introductions, then I'll walk through the Levy flyer. Each of the introduced people will give a quick summary of their role and what they did to help put this all together. And then you can type in questions whenever you want. And at the end, we will answer the questions. And I'll go through that again, but just give people a couple minutes to come in here. Why don't we go ahead and get started? Good evening. My name is Dan Chaplick, and I am the superintendent of the Sultan School District. I want to thank you all for taking time out of your Thursday evening to come and talk with us about the upcoming 2 levy measures, Proposition 1, which is a replacement educational programs and operation levy, and Proposition 2, safety, critical infrastructure, technology, and new transportation facility. I'm going to go ahead and introduce some of the panelists, and they can talk a little bit about their role in both the school district and how that translates to putting this levy together. And then they will push it back to me, and I'll talk a little bit more about the logistics of how this would work. And we'll go ahead and I'll just walk through the presentation. And we will, at the end of this, answer any questions that you might have and just move on from there. And so, again, thank you for coming. So Dan Ballard, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your role in this?
Yeah, thank you, Superintendent Chaplick. My name is Daniel Ballard. I'm the Director of Fiscal Services, Child Nutrition, and Risk Management. I have been with the district since August of 2012, so coming up to close to my 10th year anniversary, and have been in those roles the entire time being with the district. Was participated quite heavily as far as the development and the rationale behind the measures as they were developed and then prepared, working with bond counsel and our consultants and so forth to make sure that the estimates and the factual documents that we had were done appropriately and properly.
Thank you. Charlie?
Hi there, I'm Charlie Weaver. I'm the Director of Operations for the Sultan School District. I run a lot of the back end stuff, maintenance, grounds, custodial, a little bit of transportation stuff. I've been on the CFAC, which is a district member and public member group to look at the district and decide what is needed, what is not needed, when it's needed. We came up with a list of things. Some of these things were given to the board to look at, and we came up with a must-have list, and I can share that as needed today.
Thanks, Charlie. Dave?
Hi, guys. I'm Dave Moon. I'm the Director of Technology. Been here a long time, 23 years. Just as a refresher, in 2018, we asked the community to support a dedicated technology level. We broke everything down into 3 simple categories. We addressed all of our problems. I feel like we are now caught up. And moving forward, we're going to be in kind of a maintenance level now. So we want to maintain what we have so we don't find ourselves way far behind again and asking for a bunch of money to get caught up again. So that's going to equate to about 25% of this new proposition too.
And so when we get into after the presentation, when we get into the question and answer phase, we will, many of these questions will be addressed to either Dan, Charlie, or Dave, and I will participate certainly in some portions of that as necessary, but they will be able to answer your questions. But before we go on, I want to give a special thanks to Cassie Plummer, works as the superintendent's executive secretary here in the district office, does a little bit of everything, including spending part of her Thursday evening here helping us navigate through this. But I'm very thankful for all that she does for the school district and the community. Spends most of her time these days working on COVID stuff. And so we're doing all we can to keep our doors open, but I'm really thankful for her. So this flyer that you see here is what has been mailed out to your mailbox. We have a bulk mailing permit, and we try to send it to all of the box holders in the Sultan School District. And that would be both in Sultan, in Startup, in Gold Bar, and the unincorporated areas. If you didn't get a flyer, we can certainly give you one here in the district office. But if you can scroll to the bottom, Cassie, I'm going to start by giving a little bit of history. If you look at the local impact summary, the levy that we're just completing right now, or the 2 levies, really came about in 2018 when the McCleary decision was made and the state began paying a much greater portion of funding for public schools, because at that particular time, the maintenance and operation levy, which it was called, was for the local citizens here, $3.50 per thousand evaluation. The law changed at that time and it went down to $1.50. And so we ran what was called an enrichment levy, or what it is, the educational programs levy. We estimated at $1.50. You can see over the 4 years it fluctuated down and up a little bit. And we also added what Dave Moon had mentioned, which was a technology levy. For probably the last 19 or 20 years prior to running that technology levy, we would go out and visit companies like the FBI, various agencies that were getting rid of surplus computers, and we would go get them, pick them up, bring them back here, and Dave's team would get them up to a functional speed and put them in our classrooms. It was an incredible amount of work that group did, and we couldn't be doing that right now. And so we are thankful, grateful, and I can't say how many other ways for the support of that additional 50-cent capital projects levy that was dedicated to technology at that time. Can you scroll back up, Cassie? And so I'll start now by just talking about Proposition 1. There's a lot of different questions that come up, and some people will say, well, if the state's paying for all of education, why do you still have to run a levy? Well, what they did is they picked up a much greater portion of what they're paying, but they aren't paying for all of it. And so if we want some of these extra things, and those are the things that are listed up there, and then some more, this is where a replacement educational programs and operations levy comes in. And so we ran it at $1.50, which was the limit at that time. And it goes to doing all of the extra things that, there's more than are just listed here, but these are some of the main ones. College and the high school, advanced placement. We're not funded to run those programs, and we want to keep an array of things available for students really at all levels and all interest levels. They pay a good portion of special education, but they don't pay for all of it. And so right now, I think that we pay in the school district probably $700,000 towards that particular cost. And so if we didn't have this, we'd have to figure out a way to cut 700,000 from that, and all of the alternative learning programs that we use. We have Sky Valley Options is the main one, and it's at Sultan High School. It used to be separate, but it is now in that building. But we hire staff and serve kids that perform best in that setting, where they have more of a contract-based learning. They take 2 or 3 classes at a time, sometimes 4, and they're on a totally different schedule, but it works for them. And whereas the main classroom experiences have not. School nurses and mental health support specialists. We have 4 school nurses right now. We're paid for probably about 1, maybe a little bit more than 1. One of the terms that I didn't mention to you was, a big thing that you hear about when you talk about, well, what's basic education and how you define that? Well, they had the state and the legislature developed what was called a prototypical school funding model. And so they would say, well, how many school nurses will we give to a school district that has 2,000 kids, and out generates a number? How many teachers would we give to a school that has 400 students? How many principals, how many custodians, how many groundsmen? And so they fund certain levels of those, and it improved dramatically in 2018, but it's not enough to cover what's really needed. We fund about 30 additional employees in all classifications, with the biggest classification being classified. Those are our office staff, our custodians, our paras, any support staff. Those are the ones that we fund the most of, but there is some teachers involved and there is some administrative staff involved. When you look at this in a slightly different way and you said, okay, when you take basic education and you said over the course of one day, what does the state pay? They pay for 5 hours and 42 minutes. We go 6 hours and 20 minutes. And so 38 minutes of time is covered locally. That's another way to look at it, that covers all classifications. And I think that might be one of the most simple ways to look at it. Instructional materials and professional development. Our curriculum is purchased out of basic ed funding, and it's not something we get a bunch of money to do. And so as we buy materials and curriculum and the other kinds of things that it takes to operate a public school, those things are paid for out of these local levy dollars. Extracurricular, our sports and all of the extracurricular programs cost a little less than $500,000. That all comes from a local levy. Drama, music, clubs, any of those things, and they play a key role in how students respond. Kids that maybe struggle in school or maybe aren't connected with it as well as we would hope, those extra programs could be the difference in them getting across the finish line and feeling like they've got meaning or connection. And student transportation. They have a model that they fund us by, but we still fund about, I think, $200,000 of that overall transportation program. And one of the other ways to look at this is back in 2018, the local levy made up about 19% of our budget. Now it's about 10. And we've worked really hard to hold the line at those things. But the reason why we're running these is they are important to our overall ability to move forward with some of the basic needs that we have. And then Proposition 2, I'll explain some of the differences in this one. As you remember, when we went back to 2018, this was 100% at about 50 cents per thousand dedicated to technology. Moving forward, it would move from about 25% technology to 75% facilities. And that would be roofing, HVAC, the turf at the high school, other critical infrastructure improvements that Charlie can go through. And the 25% would be continued investment in technology equipment. The one change that's here And why it goes from the 52 cents per thousand to the 125 is that there's 69 cents per thousand added to each of the 4 years. And that is to successfully complete construction of a bus barn or transportation cooperative. And that's something we've been working on for a while. And I want to give the board a lot of credit. They tried to do this in a way that wouldn't cost a lot or any extra money for people, but it just was too challenging to do. We have a loan out right now that paid for about half of the middle school roof. And so we're making payments on that. We took out a second loan that was dedicated totally to this for 1.8 million. The problem was when we went out to bid for it, it would have costed another 1.5 million. And so when you add those loans up, that's $4.5 million with no dedicated way to pay it back other than out of the general fund budget. And that takes away from all these other things that we're talking about. So it became a challenge. And so it was added to this to be paid off in 4 years. And if you'll scroll down a little bit, Cassie, the real benefit to this whole thing, we've already been approved. Where does that say it? No, you're fine right there. Is if approval of Proposition 2, having the money on hand would give us access to about 3.97 million, close to $4 million to complete the facility. So if we didn't have access to that $4 million, you wouldn't see this run likely on a levy. It would just be too big. But even adding the bus barn in here and moving it from 50 cents or thereabouts up to the $1.25, it's still significantly below the maintenance and operations costs that we had in 2018. And so if you'd go to the back page, Cassie. Just a little bit more of the same, band, all of the technology, you can see it work in the classes. You see students there working on STEM, engineering type activities at the middle school. We pay for these things out of these levies. And so we're grateful for the community support we've had. And, we're asking again for support of these two particular measures. If you see that QR code right there in that page, if you were to go access that, it would take you to the levy site on our district website that has a lot more supporting documents. And one of the things that I wanted to talk a little bit more about that Charlie had mentioned, the CFAC, that stands for Community Facility Advisory Committee. We had an application process that we did back in about 2018, had probably 20 to 30 citizens participate. They applied, went through a process that we did where we looked at all of our facilities, took a look at how they were funded, a look at when they were built, all of the study and survey materials that happened when an architect came in and did an assessment of it. And from that, this list was more or less generated. I think it goes without saying, as far as the transportation facility, that was an obvious one to anyone. That whole group was able to walk through that facility and, want to exit it very quickly just because it is very old and it's not safe. And, we need to do something with it. We're in the process of doing what's called a shore up. And so we're going to spend about $16,700 to put some safety provisions in where some of the beams are not structurally safe. But it's a very temporary fix and it's not designed to last any length of time. And so that's in a nutshell, that's what those two measures will fund. And I don't know, do you see any questions in there? I see 2 questions, and so I will go ahead and start these. And the first one, is from Richard Kinnison. How do we ask for a fixed amount of money now when we don't know what the bid for the new bus barn will cost? Don't even know the bid until June. If I'm buying property, a home or a car, or opening a credit card, there is fixed amount for that loan. It doesn't make financial sense to take a blank check out Yeah, that's a great question, Richard, and I have a good answer, I think. We went through last week a value engineering process, and the value engineering process was done through a grant for about $20,000 that we received from the state of Washington. And we had contractors, had all kinds of folks here on site that went through every line item in the final bid docs that went out. And so their task was to come up with a cost, even when you project out some of the rising costs, for it not to go above what the last bid was, and even cut down below that a little bit if they can. And so that's the way we've tried to build in a solution to your question, is by saying, okay, we know what the bid amount was. We don't want to spend any amount over that for this bus barn. But it's a fair question. Second question, and Charlie or anybody you guys want to add to that? No? I said I was going to have these guys answer those, and I went ahead and answered it. I apologize. Second one, how are we asking a community full of people who have either been out of work or hurting for 2 years to pay more taxes with a levy when some are struggling to pay their own bills already, along with the new tax imposed by Snohomish County to tax them even more? Teachers in the school never missed a paycheck during the pandemic, and most got a raise, and the schools even received more assistance money from the government during that time frame. That's certainly a concerning issue for us as well, Richard. I don't know everybody's unique circumstance. I get a lot of mixed messages because the state right now has supposedly got this budget surplus, and I don't know who's out of work or not. I know that places can't find workers, and that's the part that's concerning to me, is that there seems to be lots of opportunities to work if people want to do it. I'm not saying that that's exactly the situation in everybody's case. I don't know. So Cassie, you want to add to that?
No, I was just marking that you were answering that live.
Oh, okay, got it. We'll go ahead and answer that. Yeah, that's fine. We'll have a discussion about that. How about that? But here's the last one. What is the technology refresh cycle, Dave?
Oh, great. Sorry, great question. So we actually planned on this so we don't get behind again. Every year we set up I could send, who is this? I could send George, I could send you details, but just to let you know that every year we're putting away a little bit of money dedicated to specific refresh cycles. So like classroom technology, the computers I think are on a 5-year cycle, the projection and panels are on an 8-year cycle, things like that. So we should never need a big chunk of money because we're planning all of these on a time cycle. And I'd be more than happy to share that doc with you if you'd like.
Jordan or Jay Zimmerman, how much money is used to pay salaries? I mentioned in the first part under Proposition 1 that 30 employees or thereabouts in all classifications, mostly in classified. That's our paras, nurses, folks that aren't certificated are paid for with the Proposition 1 levy. That's out of basic ed dollars. And so we can come up with something on that, but or we can come up with an exact number on that. But that's the best way to say it is the state has improved dramatically the amount they contribute, because our local taxes went from $357 per thousand to $150, and then we added the capital levy in, but still are both below that. And then George Myers. So Mr. Chaplik, to add to the last subject, per the pamphlet, the district will be getting $4 million matching funds for the new transportation building. Doesn't that mean the building will be costing $8 million? The fire department building only cost $1.8 million, and it looks like a Taj Mahal. George, it didn't cost $1.8 million. I can tell you that for sure. I can tell you that it's closer to, I think, more like 9 million is what it costed, but I don't know for sure. I don't know where you got that number, but it's not accurate. We take care of the school buses right now in the Skykomish School District. We service them, do the work on them, etc. There is an incentive for school districts to build transportation cooperatives, because they don't want, if you're doing this together, it will be cheaper in the long run. And so that's why there's such a significant match. It ends up paying for about half of the facility. Dan, do you want to add to that?
As far as this question that Mr. Myers posed here, you're saying?
Yes.
Add something to that. Again, I am not, I live in Gold Bar, so I can't speak to what the amount of the measure that the Sultan citizens were asked to vote on as far as the fire department is concerned. So I'll have to, I just don't know the answer to that question. Maybe Charlie can also chime in as well too, because he's been very involved.
The matching money and all that stuff.
Oh, as far as the matching money is concerned?
Well, you can pick whatever part. If you don't want to add on to it, you don't have to. I'm just asking if you wanted to.
I think that, again, we've had people that have been working with us to help do those calculations because they are more experienced in doing these types of projects. We have not, during my tenure, we have not done a project like this. So the work that the assistance that they provide us has been very helpful as we move through this process.
And then Jay Zimmerman, Dave, do you want to take that?
Does the tech portion pay for classes or just equipment? It pays for equipment. We have 3 pillars. So we have infrastructure, we have classroom supports, and then we have like people supports. So it doesn't actually pay for any tech classes, but it pays for the equipment in those tech classes, and then also pays for our technology integration specialist who teaches all our teachers how to use the technology that we're giving them.
Then the last question, that was what the levy we voted on. I'm not.
I think he's referring to the fire levy, Dan, is what he's referring to. Okay.
Well, I don't know, Mr. Myers, how that worked. I just know that it costed a lot more than $1.8 million. What they got, I think, and maybe where the 1.8 million came from, is they went to the legislature and asked for some, and I think Representative Eslick and a group of folks were able to get the legislature to put some money in for it. That was my understanding. I guess it would be similar to our matching money, but we're part of what's called the SCAP program, and that is construction matching that the state offers. And so I just know that the fire station costed a lot more than 1.8 million. Otherwise, we would not be asking for 8 million or what we are for a transportation barn. I promise you. So I'm on Adrian Malam's question. In the past, parents volunteering has assisted in class setting, meeting less paras, saving costs. Could we find a way to make this happen to help with funding? Volunteers are an important part of our program, but volunteers are just that, they're volunteers. And it's very difficult to build a program or design day-to-day continuity if people are showing up sometimes or they're not showing up others. Sometimes people will volunteer and just go on a field trip. We're talking about people that have a regular job in the office where they're working with citizens that come in and they're under employment in a contract. And, we feel like that's the model that serves best, but certainly having volunteers is a huge help. I don't know that would solve the issue. We've certainly tried to supplement things with volunteers, but I think as far as a long-term solution, it doesn't work very well.
And I think the other thing too is obviously over the past couple of years with COVID and wanting to minimize the number of additional people from the outside, not trying to minimize again the value of people volunteering, but just trying to limit the number of people coming onto the campuses has made that difficult.
Yeah, yeah. And then I think back up to the top to Richard Kinnison, as per the current salary rates, why are we 30 to 50% higher than the national average for money being paid to school staff, specifically for senior level positions? Was something accomplished significantly enough to justify those kinds of raises? If we have those vast amounts of funds left over, it would be greatly in this endeavor. It would help greatly in this endeavor, specifically at the principal, vice principal level, where they have been adding 5 to 20 per year consistently over the last 3 years. Yeah, Dan, do you want to start talking a little bit about how the money comes to us from the state and, you know, how much it costs? We talked a little bit about this today. Give it your best shot, and then I'll follow up.
Yeah, well, yeah, Mr. Kinnison, again, I can't, comment. It says, I think you said here, national average, use the term national average. So, as we know that education salaries do vary greatly from across the country. So from that standpoint, that will obviously play into that. But we do receive specific funding amounts per the Cleary decision and so forth for administrative positions. You talk about specifically here administrative, principal, vice principal. So I'll just kind of contain my comments to that for a specific level of funding that we receive for the number of funded positions. So you receive a certain number of funded positions based on the prototypical school model, which Dan talked about earlier, and then you receive an amount for each of those funded positions. That those resources then are used to compensate the individuals who are performing those assignments.
And I would just address the bottom part of that. I don't know where where your data is coming from. We're adding 5 to 20,000 per year over the last 3 years. That's not accurate. There's certainly we are a state where we collectively bargain, and we do that with all groups, and we try to be reasonable with all of our groups and make sure that people want to stay here and be here, but not be so underpaid compared to our neighboring districts that we're constantly going through good employees. It's a tough deal. One of the things you can do is, and I'll have somebody type this in, or I'll try to type it in. Go to the North Kitsap Sun teachers' salaries. They keep a database. You can look up my name and see where I'm at. You can look up any person's name and see where they're at. And then you can look up administrators in different districts and see where they are. They've always done a really good job of keeping that particular, by name. You can figure out who's doing what. And so really it comes down to trying to be very responsible with the money that we collect through taxes and the levy, but at the same time trying to be competitive. If I'm getting paid X amount of dollars here, 20,000 or whatever it is, and somebody 15 miles away is paying 35 for exactly the same job, depending on certain circumstances, money isn't the only thing, but it certainly is part of the equation in trying to keep things, competitive and incentive to stay and do the work here. So I will look at that. Govsalaries.com. I'm likely familiar with it, but the one I usually rely on is North Kitsap Sun. And of course, I can look at our own salaries right here.
I just did a quick, web search, and yes, there's a great deal of variability across the United States between average salaries. It just talks about teacher salaries. It shows state of New York is actually the highest in the United States. Then they talk about some of the very low, at the opposite end of the scale would be a state like maybe Oklahoma or South Dakota or Mississippi. And things like that. So yes, he is right. There is a great deal of variability around the United States.
Then Charlie, if you could, thank you, Dan. And Richard, we'll type all this out and and do whatever we can to make sure that you're getting your questions answered. And if we're not understanding, we want to make sure we answer them. Can you answer the question, Charlie, from Fisher with the HVAC, all the schools?
You bet. So our current systems, the mechanical pieces have the ability to increase the airflow per the guidelines, which we are following. The HVAC that we need to change is the circuitry, the controls of it. There's two parts to that. There's like a main brain that is at each campus, and then there's at each unit, there's a smaller piece of circuitry that runs each of the different mechanisms to keep temperatures and airflow and CO2 levels where they're supposed to be. New roof, I can go to the next one too, George. Yeah, Sultan Elementary. Oh, I didn't get to read the whole question. It's gone. Let me switch here.
Hang on, Charlie, sorry.
That's okay. I can scroll here. Why are we putting a new roof on Sultan Elementary if just a few years ago we're discussing tearing it down? Isn't it the first building to be rebuilt? That's a good question. I can answer a portion of it. While we are using the building, we need to keep the inside dry. The roof that's on it has passed its life expectancy, and we have leaks and have had leaks, and we repair them as we can, but the entirety of the roof needs to be replaced until we can replace the building, if and when. It's not certain that it will be replaced, but it's a want, but right now we don't have the funds to replace the building. So we have to maintain the structure that we have and make it so that it is a safe and clean learning environment for our students and staff.
I think I would add on to that a little bit, George. That's a good question because that was discussed. And I think when you're working in a community facility advisory committee, or we're in a board meeting discussing different things, you talk about a lot of different options. I think if you remember a couple of years ago, I don't know if you can remember seeing all the blue tarps on top of Sultan Elementary School, but we had a very serious compromise at one of the main seams. And while we've got it patched, it's temporary. It's not going to hold forever. And speaking to the building, I guess in looking at how things have happened with all of the new homes being built, and I don't know this for sure, and it isn't just my decision, but I would say we were more likely to have a third elementary school come into play before rebuilding a second elementary school, if that makes sense, just because of the number of kids that would be here. And so based on that, you think, okay, well, we need to fix the roof and continue to maintain the facility. Sultan Elementary School is not eligible for significant state matching funds until the year 2030 or 2031. And so you're looking at a lot of different options, but that's kind of the main one right there. I am currently working with the Department of Natural Resources right now, trying to work with their Land for Schools program up behind the developments off of 124th is DNR property. And that DNR property just happens to be in a trust that the DNR saves for school lands. Since we're collecting impact fees based on the building going in there, one of the things that those impact fees can be used for, or the main thing, is to do things, add classrooms or whatever, that would offset new incoming kids based on all the construction. And it also, we worded it so if we needed to buy property for a school, we could do that as well. And so it's an excellent question. And, I think the board may, come up with a different solution in the years to come. But, at least the way I see it right at this time, somebody will say, well, you're going to be building a new school soon too. I don't see a new school being built during the time that this second levy is going on, but we'll just have to see how things play out. We're in the process right now of looking at adding 2 more portables to Sultan Elementary School and a portable to Gold Ball Elementary.
And to add on to that, we had the middle school has a similar roof, and we had repairs. Well, we got to a point where there was some leaks into the band room, and we had to close off that section of the building for a time until it could be repaired. And there was some water damage that happened inside. And so the reasons, we want to prevent that from happening so that we can keep the spaces good for the students.
And we had to bring a company in to test the insides of the walls for mold. The challenge was that when we lifted the roof off to replace it, there was significant damage in I guess it would be the east and the south walls of the school, to the point to where there was some mold. Fortunately, it was encapsulated, but it had been there for a long time, because when the middle school addition was done, there was some failing structure even at that time that I think the structure was built onto. So.
Dan, before we move on, Mr. Kinnison had a question about the Kitsap Sun thing. I want to make sure that he got his answer.
Okay.
Mr. Kinnison, just if you go into Google or whatever search engine you like to use, just type Kitsap Sun teacher salary database or teacher database. Should be the first response, and you can click on that link. It'll take you to that. It's an excellent tool. I will say that they have not updated that for the 2021 school year. The 1920 school year is the last data that is represented there. So I'm hopeful that they'll continue to maintain that. But as it sits right now, the most recent year's information is not contained there. So
There are two more questions. Adrian, unaware of virtual versus classroom school setting moving forward with COVID. Money allocated differently is necessary depending on this outcome. Can funds have option of being given differently on what unknown situation happens? I'm not sure I understand. Dan, do you understand?
I'll try. I think what she's asking is if COVID continues, can more resources be funneled to alternative remote learning options as opposed to in-person options, I think is what she's asking. And again, one thing that has been very helpful is some of the ESSER money that we have gotten has had a great deal of flexibility attached to it, to where we have been able to provide additional opportunities for non-traditional or alternative learning opportunities for students. But again, that is one-time money, or it appears that it will be one-time money. So I'm thinking that's what she's referring to.
I've got to scroll up here. Let's see here. Okay. Yeah, Mr. Kinnison is just mentioning that they're most of the sites the same way. 2020 is the latest, and I think you're correct. I just don't know. I don't know why that is. I'm really not sure. They've done what we do is we upload all of our salary information into a database. Dan, if you want to explain what that database is, and that's where the Kitsap Sun is getting their information.
Yeah, they're using what's called the S275 personnel reporting data, which is submitted in the fall. So that data has been at the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction for several months now. Again, I can't speak to the reason why they haven't updated their website, but again, I think it's an excellent tool where citizens or whomever can go and get information about any school district employee in any district in the state. So I'm hopeful that they will get that, maintain that, and keep that tool available for citizens.
Yeah. And then Mr. Myers, it just seems there's no long-term direction as it keeps changing with major funds involved. I'm sorry that that's your perception, Mr. Myers. I would say that the Community Facility Advisory Committee worked really hard to try to develop direction. I think if something's changed, it's the awareness that they're going to build a whole lot more houses in a lot shorter period of time than any of us were aware. And that, to me personally, was a little bit of the surprise of COVID, not knowing what to expect. But the building has just been out of sight. And so you realize that we're not going to be able to build, renew, Sultan Elementary School, and at the same time go build another elementary school. That's just doesn't seem feasible. And so looking at this with Sultan Elementary School not being it qualifies for a little bit of match because there was some work done to abate some, I think some asbestos at some point. But it just seems like the best move forward right now is to replace that roof. We're going to have Sultan Elementary for a while, and until it qualifies for match, go for that. We're more likely to have a new school. But again, this is a school board decision, not a Dan Chaplet decision. I'm trying to explain sort of how did we get to this changing place, because I think there's more home developments that are even on par right now that I wasn't even aware of. Charlie, you want to add anything to that?
Well, I was going to answer George's question here. You said a portion of the middle school roof was replaced. What is the condition of the rest of the roof? So in this levy, the rest of that roof would be replaced. It is in just as bad a condition as the rest of it, but it hasn't had as deep of problems yet. But we keep patching it and keeping the water out of the rooms and as long as we can. If you're familiar with roofing, it's a hypalon roof, and the life expectancy is not very long, and it's very difficult to trace leaks and to repair them. But that, to answer your question, about half of the middle school roof still needs to be replaced.
And then, Dan, I'm going to defer back to you for Adrienne Malam. And yes, that's what she was asking.
Good. Glad I was able to answer your question.
Adrienne, is there more information that you wanted?
And Richard, thank you for the Gov Salaries. I'm actually on that website right now. I was not aware of that website. So thank you for that resource. Appreciate that.
And guys, even outside of this, you're more than welcome to call any of us at any time. We take our role as stewards of the community's money very seriously, and we want our public schools to be the best they can. And we understand that there's ups and downs and different things with all of this, but we want to be good at what we do and take our role very seriously. And I know that the folks that are assisting me with this are of the same mindset, and so please don't hesitate to reach out at any time if you have questions, and we'll do our best to answer. And if we can't, we'll get back to you. And so we'll go through this transcript and try to give a more try to elaborate some more on these answers tomorrow. If you're left with any questions, I apologize.
Yeah, I agree with what Dan is saying is that we realize that this method of conducting a meeting is not ideal. It would be better to be able to do this in a face-to-face situation. But again, I echo his sentiments, extend personal invitation to reach out to me via email or phone. Be happy to talk with you.
And I guess one of the questions I would ask, just for some feedback, is anybody wants to, that's in the audience, has this been helpful? Is there something we can do different that would assist in a better way? We're certainly open. I know that this is a different way than I've ever done it. We've always gone out to groups and presented and talked to them. And, I think there's been a little bit of reluctance to do that just because we're trying to just keep the operation running with all the COVID going around.
And it looks like Adrian had a follow-up question to the.
She did. Okay, let me go up to the top here. Yeah, I don't see it. I don't see it.
Oh wait, no, it says it just seems like it is difficult to use funding accurately with that unknown, is what she said.
Yeah. There's a question I didn't see in here. It's from Roxanne, 6:41 p.m. So as school district staff and participants, we are limited to sharing the facts, of the levy with the community. And so the levy committee, which is a group of citizens, I guess Charlie answered this. And so he's already taken care of it. And so I didn't see his answer there, but we're not here saying, hey, you got to vote yes. That's not a legal role of ours.
Dan, can I speak to Adrian's
Sure.
follow-up question just a little bit, because she did pose it as a question. So you are correct. As I had said before, we have in what's called the ESSER 3 allocation, it's split in an 80%, 20% manner. The 80% allows us a great deal of flexibility. It is very flexible in how we utilize those dollars. The 20% of the allocation is for educational recovery, and it is much more prescriptive, which means basically we have a much narrower list of things of which those dollars can be used for. So I think the federal government realizes that districts have these challenges, and because of that, they have provided a great deal of flexibility in how those dollars can be used while still maintaining compliance. One of my jobs as the auditing and compliance officer is to be sure that we're using these funds in an appropriate and responsible manner. So Adrian, rest assured, we're watching those things very closely.
Okay. Jeff Estes. Can we have a community meeting somewhere, perhaps at one of the churches? This would allow more information exchange and a Q&A from the community members not using the internet. We can, we can certainly discuss that. When we've done this before, we've literally tried to make lists of, all the groups that we're aware of. We have done that in the past, and unfortunately, we just haven't had very good turnout to those kinds of events. But we'll certainly discuss it internally, and I'll talk with the board about it and see what their thoughts are.
George has another question here. Is there any funded replacement cycles in place for roofs for replacement before they get to the point of deteriorating and needing major repairs? No, there's not. It's a capital project, and general fund is what typically is the state monies. It can't be paid it cannot be paid with impact fees or anything like that either. So either the district slowly would have to save money over years, or take out a loan, or put it to a vote to the people.
So, but I think that you do have a replacement cycles for all these things.
Correct. Yeah, we do have a really large list of all of the large components within the district, their life expectancy, when we should start replacing them. Like the football field, the track, the things that we've done recently. The roofs, depending on what roof you buy, if you get a 20-year or 30-year or 50-year roof, and then that goes on the list, and then it's noted out there the year that would need to be replaced again.
I think, Dan, that the key word that I pick up on in Mr. Meyer's question is funded.
Yeah,
That
right,
is
right,
that is the key
Right.
word, is we have a replacement cycle, but Mr. Myers, we have not had a dedicated funding mechanism of which to accomplish those replacement cycles. That's what Proposition 2 has. It has a significant component that will allow for those scheduled replacements with available, stable revenues of which to accomplish those projects.
And I think I can answer it in a different way, and it's a really good question. And so if you go back to Proposition 1 and all of the things that it covers, we get some money from the state for what are called MSOCs. Okay, when we calculated what we spent on MSOCs from the previous year, it was $450,000 more than we received from the state, and that's just to do basic repairs and of the various operations things. We don't get a lot of money for that, and that's where having a capital levy comes in to help us fix some of this stuff that we couldn't possibly save enough for. I could cut all of the administrators in this school district, and we can do it for a few years, and we still wouldn't be able to do some of the things we need to do. It just doesn't work.
Well, Dan, so obviously, and Charlie can certainly back this up, the aging infrastructure that the district has is expensive as things break and things, replacement parts sometimes are not available, which means you have to upgrade those things because repairs cannot be made. Energy efficiency, things like that are not as good as they could be due to the just general age of our infrastructure.
That's true. Most of our buildings are old. Some of the newest structures we have are some additions that were done in like '96. Gold Bar Elementary, Sultan Elementary, middle school. The high school was built in '87. For my own personal home, when it comes, buy a house and it's got a roof, and then when 20 years later you're due for a roof, and so it's same thing but more money. All of the heating and all of the carpets and paint and all those little things all add up, and that's what we try to do, all the little things with the MSOC money that is given to us. It's the large projects that we don't have the money for.
Well, I think that, Mr. Moon could probably speak to this, and he's an excellent example of someone who we provided a dedicated revenue stream to, who previously had to be extremely creative in how he kept our infrastructure, our IT infrastructure in place. But now having, the dedicated revenue stream for 3+ years has been able to do amazing things in upgrading our infrastructure. Dave, I don't know, do you want to touch on that? Or?
I agree. I mean, I think I see where he was going with the question. And we set ourselves up for that success. So we're funding an equipment replacement cycle now. So, that's why we need so much less, because we're never gonna have to ask for this big chunk in the future. But,
Kind of in maintenance. You're in maintenance mode now.
I'm in maintenance mode now, and I'll be in maintenance mode forever now.
Right.
As long as we maintain funding for that maintenance mode.
Yep.
I
think there's another question, Dan, from Fisher.
I don't know why. Oh, these are the open ones?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, if you do not get money from levy and took out a loan, how does that get paid back? It gets paid back from, our regular cash flow that is generated by, the amount of what's called apportionment that we get from the state. And so you'd have to make payments on that. We had a loan out previous to the one that's currently open. And, we just made payments on it. And at times when you're able to, you pay a little more. One of the things I posted on the website, looking at our fund balance and different things, we are not sitting on a lot of cash. Our payroll every month is, 2,200,000. We have about 2 million in the bank, and that's a pretty reasonable amount to have. So. And Adrian's question just seems like it's difficult to use funding accurately with that unknown. Well, we work hard at, Dave, Charlie, and especially in Dan's role, making sure that, depending on what, funding is earmarked for, that we're doing it correctly. And that's one of the things that I think ends up being confusing for people that, don't live in this world every day, is that there's money that we have that can only be designated for certain things. General fund money, which we're talking about here, can be spent on anything. And so it is the more open one, but that's one of the challenges when they say, well, why do you have that, but you can't bring that money over here? Well, it exists through a grant program or through money that is specified just for that particular, staff or way of doing things.
I think, just kind of to dovetail onto that, Adrian, we go through an audit every year. The state auditor's office comes out and spends typically anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks working in conjunction. I work in conjunction with them. We don't know when they arrive the things that they will be looking at, but happy to report that we've had excellent audits during my tenure, and I take that very personally and will continue to strive for those high standards.
And then Richard Kinnison has a question. Do we have anyone advocating to the state to get additional funding? Yeah, I think we all do to a certain amount, Richard. I want to talk to you about, maybe a phone call, or we can even talk in person. I'm not sure who's doubling salaries every 3 to 5 years. We just couldn't sustain anything like that. But maybe it was somebody that was a half-time employee at a 0.5 FTE that, the next year they were 1.0, but we just wouldn't be in business for very long if that was the case.
Yeah, I think that's true. Dan, the good point. Anyone that would, Richard, as you're looking at the different databases, whether it be the Kitsap Sun site or the Gov Salary site, Dan made an excellent point. If you saw someone, it would be very important to check their FTE or full-time equivalency to make sure that it's apples to apples from year 1 to year 2. If somebody saw a significant jump in their salary, it most likely would be a situation where they were a part-time individual and then went to a full-time or increased the number of hours, and therefore correspondingly, understandably, had a larger salary because they're working more hours in a given year.
High school and middle school are a good example of potential for those, where we've got some part-time teachers, and some of them have started by teaching one course. And so they get paid what would be considered a 0.2. And then the next year, you might add another course or a couple more courses, depending on the school's needs. And so they go from a 0.2 to a 0.6 or even full-time. And so you're getting services back from what you're paying them. But I don't know. I would want to talk to you about what you're seeing there, and so I could answer it really accurately and specifically.
Most typically, Dan, in the changes in FTE we see those changes most prominently in classified staff, where they've gone from a part-time position and maybe they've added an hour or 2 hours, and so their FTE has changed significantly from year 1 to year 2.
That could be.
Teaching staff, for the most part, most of our teaching staff, save just a few, are 1.0 or a full-time FTE equivalency.
Okay. And then a question still open from Mr. Myers. It just seems that there's no long-term direction as it keeps changing with major funds involved. I attempted to answer this one with, where we were as a community facility advisory committee and some of the recommendations that came from that group, which was all pre-COVID. And then, we were just planning on some homes being built or some developments. And then once COVID hit, and the developments were, probably a lot more than any of us expected, and trying to anticipate, exactly how that plays out. That's probably what I would say is the reason for saying, look, we're not going to replace, the board could rule otherwise, but we're not going to replace Sultan Elementary School in the near term. But we do need a roof. And we do need to make sure the gutter system works. And we do need to make sure that the community's investment and, you know, their asset, which is Sultan Elementary School, is taken care of. Whereas, because of all the building, it's likely that there will be some real pressure at the elementary level specifically to have a place to house all the students.
I think Charlie definitely has a plan. I mean, Charlie is just, has been patiently waiting for some dedicated resources to start implementing some of those things. I mean, Charlie, do you want to talk about that? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I like I said, I have an extensive list. I come from a background where I believe in fixing things right the first time. Some people's motto is to keep putting Band-Aids on things, and I think then in the long term that costs more. So I'm a firm believer in fixing things right the first time, and that way having to go back and spend man hours and money on the same thing over and over. So yeah, my list is extensive. It includes everything from a boiler to a roof to a asphalt to paint to carpets to desks. I mean, it's anything that has a usable life that is a higher dollar item is on my list. Oh, it's on the screen now.
And so if you looked at the bottom tab, which is good, he's got this for all areas: athletics, bus replacement schedule, vehicle replacement.
Yeah, when we did the development and the research in putting together Proposition 2, the capital projects proposed levy, is we did this from a bottom-up perspective, is basically taking this information of the needs that Charlie has been compiling this list over a decade, and basically saying, to accomplish these things, how much would it take? And so we worked it up, and that's how we arrived at the ask in the proposition, is truly that these will translate into specific projects, and these are reasonable estimates on what it would take to accomplish those projects.
So we will go through the transcript of questions and type up answers. We will post that hopefully tomorrow. This depends, but we'll at least have part of the transcript done tomorrow, but the goal is to have all of it. I want to thank everybody for coming. I want to thank Dave and Cassie and Charlie and Dan for your assistance. It looks like there's another question. Let me go down there real quick. Well, thank you, Mr. Fisher or Miss Fisher. I appreciate
Also, if there's anybody that needs some specific information about any of our buildings, feel free to reach out to me, and I can share the list with you, answer any questions that you might have.
Likewise, again, extend that invitation to anybody that would like some time to ask personal, specific questions.
Yeah, I'll climb onto that train as well. Please feel free to send me questions.
Then a reminder, we're planning to do it again next Wednesday evening, 6:30 p.m. And we'll go from there.